All right. We're continuing again in Issurei chapter 13. We are on the laws of conversion. Again, the laws of conversion can be found in Mishneh Torah in Issurei chapter 13 and 14. We are on halacha hey. In the Chabad version, that would be halacha tet. We're reading from the Machbili edition. It states, Giyoret sherenua noheget badarchi Yisrael tamid. A woman who converts, who we see constantly following the ways of Israel. Kegon, such as shetid bole nidata, that she immerses herself for the reasons of nida. Truma me'esita bechayotze bazeh. And she goes as far as to separate the tithe from the dough. So here it's describing, if you see a woman that already acts Jewish, that is properly keeping the laws of Judaism and claims to be Jewish, and even with the male, someone who claims to be Jewish, if he follows the ways of Israel, the customs of Israel, and we see him go as far as to even immerse himself once he has a seminal omission, and he keeps all the commandments from the Torah, what did he say about his status? Hare elu becheskat geri tzedek, that they are presumed to be righteous converts. Did you hear that? That if there's someone around you who keeps Torah, obviously identifies his or herself as Jewish, but is a pious individual, you shouldn't have the audacity to question their conversion or even ask them for proof. You should assume that they're Jewish. Now compare that to what's done today. Now this here ties to the previous halacha that we studied yesterday, that the only time when you actually have to require witnesses to validate a conversion is when the person is coming to get married, when he's trying to enter the kahila, which means marriage, which answers a lot of questions. If someone shows up to a synagogue, you assume they're Jewish. Obviously, if they're identifying as Jewish, you could count them in a minyan. You don't need proof. You don't need paperwork. But if they're coming to get married, because this involves someone else, there's actual real consequences for this, then we require witnesses. This is the halacha. Even though we don't have witnesses to testify who they converted under. Nevertheless, and now it ties it to the previous halacha, if he comes to in some way hook up or connect or to intermingle with Israel, we don't allow him to engage in marriage or to be married off to someone until he brings witnesses. So this just reiterates the previous halacha, that the only time we require any sort of proof, any sort of paperwork, in this case, witnesses who can testify that the person actually converted, is only if they're coming to marry amongst the Jewish people. Only then. Meaning, if you walk into a synagogue and they ask you if you're Jewish and you say yes, it has to end there. That's it. That means they could give you every honor, but only when it comes to marriage, that's when you need proof. Or unless they immerse in front of us. Because at that point, if they're asking to marry but they have no proof, we presume that they're Gentiles. Or we treat them as such in this area. And we continue halacha vav. Aval mishaba, if he comes, ve'amar and says, shehaya goy, that I'm a Gentile, right from the outset, that I was a Gentile, meaning that I am a convert, right? It's one thing not saying anything, but someone who acknowledges, yes, I converted. Venit gayad, but I converted, bebeit din, in front of a court. Neman, we accept and we believe him. Why? Shehapeh she'asar, that the mouth that prohibits, hu hapeh shehitir, is the same one that permits. But anyways, what's the concept behind this? If you have a person in the midst of Jewish people who acts Jewish, who looks Jewish, all of the above, and out of nowhere he tells you he's a convert, in a place that's majority Jewish, I guess one could even stretch it to a Jewish community, you believe he's Jewish. Why? Because he could have said nothing and have been accepted as Jewish, but he chose to tell the truth and acknowledge he's a convert. So, she'apeh she'asar, the mouth that prohibits, hu hapeh shehitir, is the same one that permits. B'meh devarim amurim, in what case does this apply? Be'eretz Yisrael, like we said, this applies in the land of Israel, and like we said, uvotan hayamim, and in the days or in such a situation, shecheskat hakol sham becheskat Yisrael, meaning at a time where everyone around you is just presumed to be Israel, like we said, a Jewish community or even possibly social media. Now, this is clearly a principle that's overlooked by many people today. Heck, I would say some of my haters have also overlooked or not familiar with this, or the bulk of what halacha actually has to say about anything. Here it says that if someone tells you off the bat they converted in a Jewish environment, not Oklahoma or Arkansas, but in a Jewish community. Heck, one could even say Jewish circles, which I'm pretty sure wouldn't exclude social media. Here it says that you believe him. And if you don't, you're breaking the halacha. And then it says, Aval b'chutz la'aretz, but outside of the land of Israel, Sarich lechavi raya, he'll need to bring proof. Ve'har kach yisa Yisraelit, and then he can marry the Jewish. And then he says something interesting here. It says, Ve'ani omer, but I say, shezo ma'ala b'yechusin. And this, he says, seems even to be a bit too stringent. Meaning what he's saying here is that he thinks that this was in some way adopted as an extra stringency to protect the accuracy of Jewish people, so that we could be certain that people were actually Jewish. Halacha Zayin, kashem shemolimu mitbilim et hagerim, in the same way that we circumcise and immerse converts, kak molimu mitbilin et havadim hanilkachim min hagoyim leshem abdut. The same is with slaves that are acquired from Gentiles for the sake of service or servitude. Now, this is one aspect that many people overlook when it comes to the laws of conversions. Every Gentile slave is converted to Judaism. The halacha is that yes, they're circumcised, right, the sign of the covenant, and they're immersed, and then they have the status of a woman in Judaism, which means that they're not bound to commandments that have time constraints or that are limited by time or positive commandment. But nevertheless, they're forcibly converted, solidifying the idea that conversion is a legal process. Intention ultimately doesn't matter. If the procedure goes through, the person is an Israelite. And then it continues, Halokeach evet min hagoy, if you acquire a slave from a Gentile, Vakadam ha'eved hataval l'shem ben chorin, and the slave immerses himself for the sake of his freedom, meaning just by wanting to become free, he immerses himself because the halacha is what? Again, he's a quasi-Jew at this point. But if he immerses himself, what does it say? Kana atzmo, he gains his freedom. Now, this is kind of a ground-shaking idea for all the people who think Judaism is primitive because it endorses slavery or servitude. Here it's saying that in Judaism, a slave goes free whenever he or she wants by deciding to complete their conversion. Meaning, they're already Israel. They're a slave amongst Israel. However, to be a full convert, they have to immerse, in this case for the sake of freedom, which is understood as being for the sake of conversion, and then he goes free. Nobody's forced to remain a slave, assuming they don't want to become Israel. Quite interesting. And here the Rambam explains it, that this is if at the time of conversion, or immersion here, harini tovel bifneche leshem gerut, meaning if he announces while he's doing this, that I'm doing this immersion for the sake of conversion. This is quite amazing. And then it says, Ve'im taval bifnei rabu, that if he immerses only in front of his master, einu sarich lefarash, he doesn't even have to make this declaration. So what it's saying is that the first declaration is made in front of other people, acknowledging that he's doing it, l'shem gerus. He's doing it for the sake of conversion, which would acquire him his freedom. However, here it says, but if he does it only in the presence of his master, he doesn't have to say anything. Once he immerses, nishtachrar, he's free. Quite amazing, my friends. I'm pretty sure you've never heard anyone teach this. And this sheds light, again, on a lot of topics that are in some way either not mentioned or many questions that are left unanswered when people dialogue about the topic of conversion in Judaism.